All class-based combat systems revolve around 3 defining pillars. Damage dealers, who, as you might be able to guess, contribute the brunt of the outgoing damage within a given scenario. Tanks, who soak up or otherwise divert damage from the rest of the team. And supports, whose job it is to keep their teammates alive and or provide amplification. Of course, within the system, each role has defined strengths and weaknesses. In most cases, dedicated damage dealers will have to trade off utility or survivability to varying degrees. Tanks, of course, tend to fall short in personal DPS contributions, and supports rely on their teammates to be able to do their job effectively. This system of checks and balances, unlike our governments, works well, and any major disruptions to it tends to have cascading effects that can result in extremely volatile balance. The worst game ever made, Overwatch, had introduced the hero Brigitte, who was an unholy matrimony of busted healing and supportive abilities, insurmountable survivability, and completely unfair damage given everything else they could do. As you could probably expect, Brigitte's introduction to Overwatch completely upheaved any semblance of balance that may or may not have existed beforehand and ruined the game. This is something that anyone could have easily seen coming long before they had descended into the cesspit that was that game. Sure, there were characters who were more tanky, others with better raw DPS output, some with more sustain, but when one character can do everything, it'll always be a recipe for disaster. Of course, one shudders at the thought of a single character who has all of these strengths, none of the weaknesses, and is the undisputed strongest in every one of those aspects. The kind of havoc that such a character would wreak in a game would be nothing short of a horror. Well, if you play Honkai Star Rail, you'd better start believing in horror stories real fast. You're in one. We're giving away 3 Star Rail monthly passes to the community. Subscribers who comment on this video and at least one other on the channel will have a chance to win, and I'll be reaching out to the winners in the second week of October to deliver the passes to your account. Best of luck in the giveaway, and thank you to our sponsor for making this possible, U7Buy. If you're looking for a safe, cheap, and trusted digital marketplace for all things Honkai Star Rail, be sure to check out U7Buy. U7Buy offers the best prices for Oneric shards at rates 10 to 15% lower than other platforms. Here's how easy it is to use. Simply enter your UID and your order will be processed instantly. And when you're checking out, simply enter my discount code TOMMY to save an extra 3% on already low prices. Be sure to use the link in the pinned comment and description. Join millions of other satisfied customers worldwide and check out the 30,000 plus positive reviews on Trustpilot. Thank you again to U7Buy, your gateway to the best gaming deals, for sponsoring the video. Version 3.2 of the free-to-play role-playing video game Honkai Star Rail featured the Blossom to the Beyond banner. The rate-up unit for this banner being none other than Castorice, a 5-star quantum DPS unit. Upon release, Castorice immediately became the strongest unit in the game, and continues to be so several months and numerous patches later. As of right now, there are a total of 9 different viable teammates that she can be used with even the worst combination of these being superior to just about any other non-Castorice comp. And recently, Hoyo announced Evernight as an upcoming character, who leaks suggest will be another dedicated Castorice support who will only be useful on a team full of other dedicated Castorice supports, another of which coming soon after. Why? Alright, let's be honest with ourselves here. The new DPS being strong isn't exactly a recent development. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the newest release is expected to be blatantly overpowered, and those who aren't are generally categorized as a bust. We've seen that fairly recently with My Day, who, despite being undoubtedly strong by just about every metric, was basically written off by the community for not being above and beyond the accepted threshold of strength for a unit. It's pretty obvious at this point how power creep is Hoyo's bread and butter. It's no mistake how every new flagship DPS that are promoted endlessly also has absolutely game-breaking damage numbers. By releasing such obscenely overpowered characters, they incentivize pulling while also making the game significantly harder, causing previous units to become obsolete. Of course, up until the Castorice controversy, the character who most clearly exemplified the power creep crisis was our girl Firefly. Both Castorice and Firefly share a surprising amount of similarities upon release, including having the most damage out of all units by a wide margin, being a non-traditional damage dealer, every game mode becoming catered to their playstyle, using a new Path Trailblazer as a support, and their entire respective fanbases being unspeakably down bad. And while I am an unrepentant Firefly agenda maintainer, there's no doubt that this was overall not healthy for the game. However, the Firefly era of Star Rail is nothing compared to the downright tomfoolery that was and continues to be Castorice's stranglehold on the game. On one hand, I will forever be grateful to the global passive for getting that racist, sex pest tech tone out of the community, but it's also probably the most shameless thing any game has ever done to make you pull for a character. At least before, when they promoted a new character by giving them nonsensical proportions and dubious clothing, you could ignore it if you really tried. But now they're making an entirely new mechanic that requires zero skill whatsoever that you can only gain access to if you own the character. And as bad as that is, it gets worse when you remember how Castorice is an HP scaler with a summon, which basically makes your team unkillable with how much extra HP you have to work with when fighting enemies. The summon, in case you were wondering, literally does make the team unkillable. So all in all, we have a Mickey Mouse anti-death mechanic, on top of an absurd amount of HP crutch, on top of several other summons to soak up damage, on top of another anti-death dragon. With all that in mind, at the very least, a team as safe, forgiving, and frankly brain dead as that is balanced out by the lackluster DPS that they put out. It is balanced out by the lackluster DPS, isn't it? Here's a graph of how much HP bosses have in endgame content since the conception of the game. This may look familiar to you if you've seen a previous video, but it illustrates just how direct an effect power creep has on the HP inflation crisis. Again, Google Honkai Star Rail inflation and scroll down in the images tab to really get it. Of course, you could probably pinpoint the exact moment when the big bads came in, the 1-2 punch of Acheron and Firefly that ruined the game permanently, skyrocketing the difficulty of endgame content, making bosses ridiculous HP sponges. And, look, when I made the Heislands video talking about how she became the strongest unit in the game, I didn't even add Castorice into that equation because she's basically just a cheat code, and it goes without saying that yes, she was, is, and probably for a long time will be the most busted thing in the entire game. The fact is, there are a lot of people who love Castorice's design and don't think she's problematic whatsoever.
I'm not one of them. LeBron James.
But I want you to hear this because it's important. In spite of all the negativity towards Castorice I've been putting out in this video, and looking back in a lot of my Star Rail videos before this one, I am not a Castorice hater. I like her as a character, and by golly, she's a darn good time to use. I mean, seeing a million ticks of true damage from Netherwing Breath before exploding for the entire stage's HP bar really never gets old, and I'm clearly not above being as sweaty of a meta follower as the worst of them. But I've said it before for Firefly, and I'll say it again now. This level of brokenness is unequivocally free-to-play unfriendly and bad for the health of the game. And let's be honest with ourselves here. A character like Castorice was inevitable. Sure, her release was wrought with deliberate, malicious choices. Why does she not have a viable free-to-play Lycone? Why did they think the global passive was a good idea, and why is it exclusive to her? Why did they make the homepage look like one of those shady online gambling sites? Why does her bloated kit allow her to ignore half the game's mechanics and have such a large margin of error that you usually get rewarded for playing badly? Why are they still continuing to release more premium teammates? Why did every game mode suddenly become AoE Castorice slop? You could go on and on. None of this should have been that surprising considering Hoyo's past MOs. I think hating Castorice is like hating Elon Musk. Sure, he benefited from one of the most evil systems of power in history, apartheid, and made his fortune stealing from and exploiting the hard work and intellectual fruits of others. Sure, he abandoned all his children. Sure, he used all his undeserved power and influence to promote the hatred of and violence against people like me. Okay, bad example. It's like hating Mr. Beast. Yes, his empire has done irreparable harm to content creation as a whole. And yes, he seems to glean great joy out of exploiting the suffering of the less fortunate, but he's more of a symptom of a larger broken ecosystem rather than being an underlying cause. In that way, someone like them was inevitable. Gacha game developers like Hoyo have only gained more and more wealth from being more and more ruthless in its monetization. So this was just one footnote in the larger, ever-developing narrative of Honkai Star Rail's monetary practices. So now we're at an awfully difficult spot, because not only is the safest, easiest team also clearly the strongest in every single game mode, since their release they've only received buffs in the form of more and more best in slot units. But that's not even the worst part. Sure, they'll keep cranking up boss HP, and more units will be made irrelevant, but how on earth do you power creep a character who gets better the harder the game gets? As enemies' attack keeps getting higher, which has been a clear trend over the past several patches, slowly every single other comp will be phased out due to not being able to properly sustain. But all that means for Castorice is easier, more frequent, and harder hitting dragons. And of course, with Castorice being so clearly ahead of everyone else in terms of damage output, they'll need to quite literally power creep every single other DPS unit in the game first before they can actually affect Castorice's spot in the meta. And let's get one thing straight here. We all know how Castorice dog walks AoE scenarios, but let's be honest, in Blast, she's still the highest performing unit, and even in single target, most people have E1 Tribby, which still keeps her locked in as the best choice no matter what. And right now, there's no meaningful distinction between any of the three game modes. MOC, Pure Fiction, and Apocalyptic Shadow have nearly identical AoE Castorice fodder setups, and all of them have mechanics that Castorice either directly benefits from or gets rewarded for completely ignoring. I've seen a fair share of people discussing anti-Castorice mechanics like anti-heal, similar to in Sam's boss fight, or maybe the max HP reduction like the Ascended. Sure, this might have a small but noticeable effect on her performance, but I don't think people realize just how hard this will hit every other team as well. At the end of the day, you just can't balance or alter the mechanics around multipliers that are as obscene as Castorice's. So what can we expect moving into the future of Star Rail's meta? Well, as it's been since her release, and certainly now with Everknight's release, Castorice will remain at the top, and will continue to be so until just about every current character falls way below any accepted level of viability. So remember that graph earlier? Well, the same way we viewed the spike in HP from Firefly as absurd and beyond the pale, the trend we're likely going to see will make even Castorice's spike look trivial, and nobody will be safe from that. Thank you for watching. More Star Rail videos coming soon.
Anyway, $4 a pound.